Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Mosi Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode. Hello and welcome back to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and Television. We're fresh off of our Matzoween here and starting to talk about new movies again. This week we have the Aaron Sorkin flick, The Trial of the Chicago 7 for you. I am going to be your host, Steve Ramosi, joined today by Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Fight the man.
And Christopher Morgan.
I hold me in contempt.
Me too, buddy. So I think we're going to kick off with a funny log line from Ian.
Aaron Sorkin libsplains progressivism.
Yeah.
Might be a little unfair, but yeah.
That's pretty accurate, I think. Anyway, why don't you continue talking, go into the plot for us.
So this is a recreation of the famous trial of the Chicago 7. Well, starts off the trial of the Chicago 8, becomes the 7. Actually, in a fairly well-constructed movie. Regardless of the accuracy of the work and the portrayals, and there's a line in this work that says trials aren't political, they're civil or they're criminal. And then they make the argument that this is a political trial. This is a political movie. And but regardless of all of that, the construction of it, well, they have 7 characters. Of course, they can't follow each of their stories, so it basically follows the story of Tom Hayden, Abby Hoffman, and their conflicting ideals, and a discussion on the left with on their different interpretations of how to progress with fighting the war. It deals with the lawyers, and it's basically a trial movie. The thing is, I found myself, I don't like Aaron Sorkin, as Steve-O, you're well aware of this. Mm-hmm. And I found myself, against my better judgment, really enjoying this movie, particularly in the end, because I think it's really well-constructed narrative to make you feel really good and make you raise up, yeah, let's go, let's conquer the world. But there's something that sticks in my craw with this. And perhaps it's, I don't like ascribing motivation to people, but there's something about this that just doesn't sit right to me. Like, almost like I'm watching someone con me. Mm-hmm. But that is for later questions. For right now, I think it's actually a very well constructed, actually above average biopic type thing. And I think it's one of the better ones we've seen recently, much better than Steven Spielberg's attempts at it in recent years. And I'm either on a strong 2 or even I could consider it a 3. But overall, I think it was just well done.
I can actually, I agree with you on everything. Knowing it was Aaron Sorkin and knowing it was produced by DreamWorks, which, although he's not part of it now, was started by Steven Spielberg. This just has left pandering all over it. With that said, it was incredibly well constructed. As a matter of fact, it took me 3 hours to watch this movie because I kept pausing and looking things up and, just bookmarking things because I didn't really have time because I was worming my way through my day job at the same time. But the one thing I'm always trying to keep focus on, and I'm not successful at it always with this podcast, is how is the narrative presented, regardless of my feelings upon it. So with that said, considering it's extremely well constructed, considering that it really does make me want to, considering that I approach Aaron Sorkin as a leftist anti-establishment person, always with looking for the caveats, I'm going to give it a 3 because this film made me want to go and research this stuff. This film made me want to. Now, like I said, I didn't buy into the whole West Wing thing. It was, but from what I understand, from what I've seen of it, it was a well-constructed narrative. But this film really made me want to go back. And yes, I was born in 1970. And I did get a lot of this via osmosis. And I did, in the 80s, I used to listen to Howard Stern when I was in high school, and Abby Hoffman was on a lot. And to Sacha Baron Cohen's performance, I think he was a little light on his New York accent, because as I remember, it was much thicker. But I think it's a worthwhile watch, provided that you give it that little bit of skepticism. But it was extremely well constructed narrative, and really made me want to go and research the material that much more.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to give this a 3. It's leaving out all this stuff that we're going to talk about in themes and style and dialogue, which we're going to get really heavily into. I think the plot is just really well done. In terms of the construction of it, the opening scene, right from the opening scene, you're hooked. Like, I think that's a great scene where they go flash between all the different groups, and they're just talking, and they kind of, it's almost in that like West Wing walk and talk style, but it's flat, like flashing between different groups, and then they're picking up the conversation. So it's the same conversation flowing kind of throughout everybody. You get to introduce all the characters. Thought that was really strongly done. And funny, like it was not only was it done well, but it was a funny scene. Like it really did a lot of stuff right in the beginning there. And this movie stayed engaging and funny throughout the whole thing. In fact, I liked Abby's quips were really pretty good and engaging. And Mark Rylance as their lawyer, William Kunstler, is great too. He's just as you come to expect in a Sorkin script, he's sharp. Everybody's sharp as a tack, and like there's just like they immediately have a rebuttal for anything that's been said. And I think that I was reading, and Sorkin pulled a lot of this stuff that was in here from their interviews with the press and things like that. Obviously a couple things are made up, but a lot of the things that happened in this that were the plot actually happened in real life. A couple like slightly out of order and things like that, but they really made for an enjoyable flick, and one that made a lot of sense from beginning to end and didn't really have any soft spots, I didn't think, as far as the plot went. So I'm going to give it a 3 for that. I think there are soft spots in other places, but in terms of plot, no.
So there is one thing I want to bring up. Speaking of soft spots, and it's something that Rich made me think of when I was having a conversation about Marvel movies back in the day. Mm-hmm. I was reading up a bit about this movie, and one of the critiques I heard was the representation of women in this, especially women involved in the movement, and they were kind of absent from this. But that's not really I want to bring up. It actually has to go with Bobby Seale, mm-hmm. in that he, a real person, horrible things happened to him, even worse than what was presented in this movie. It seemed like he was there as both a token acknowledgement to modern day Black Lives Matter and things like that, but also his role was as a driving force for the white characters in this. And normally I'm not a person who pushes this kind of like wokeness in a sense, but after actually having a conversation with Rich about this, it made me look at portrayal of Black characters in predominantly white films. And it wasn't a terrible representation, but he just seemed a Aaron Sorkin looking at him through the eyes of white characters as opposed to him being his own character. And actually, I think that there's almost a disservice to his representation in of his storyline, because he had perhaps the most interesting of all of the 8 characters there.
Yeah, I wish we had got a little bit more of him as well, but the movie itself says something similar to what you said when the judge like goes too far and lets him go. I mean, that actually happened, and he's forced to, let the guy go. But Bobby Seale, it is, or call a mistrial in terms of his trial. And they say, like, yeah, you made their, what does he say? You made their black guy look like a martyr or something like that. And you're right. There is a lot more to his story. I wish we had known. I think that there's a lot to, but the thing is, this movie focuses on the trial. I think there was a lot that happened in between the riots, or during the riots, and then in between. Well, he wasn't even there for the riots, but in between the riots and this, they talk about it a bunch. He's in custody in Connecticut or what was it? Is a warrant? Or I think he was in custody in Connecticut for murder, and that charge gets dropped. So there are other these interesting things that they drop about him, but you're right, they don't really go into him as much as they could.
But I feel he's in service of very much. Actually, there's a couple, the 2 random white guys who are historically have to be there, and they give an explanation for why they're there, but they're in service to the other characters. Yeah. So I think that, I don't know, it's just, if there is a soft spot, it's that scene, or it's that character.
Fair enough.
In a lot of ways, I think Steve-O, and I'm trying to remember, I think Steve-O mentioned, I'm trying to remember exactly when it was, but there was an acknowledgement of that within the film, that if you're sharp, you kind of picked up on it. And I was trying to find out when this film was shot. Because one of the things they did intentionally or unintentionally, and I agree with you, that was the one thing I felt, Seale's character, his involvement in it, I was kind of not really
Bobby Seale, otherwise
Bobby Seale,
singer. I don't want to start calling him Seale.
sorry, Bobby Seale's character,
Kids from a Rose.
But the thing is that, and I was trying to find out when the production dates were, because I don't know whether it's intentional or not, but it was a really, I'm not going to say there was much subtlety in this film, but in a lot of ways, his treatment, that it, in a lot of ways was kind of treated like a B story in this, really did, in a few different ways, kind of bring to the light of the way people of color are treated in this country, and maybe even treated by the filmmaker itself. But the fact that there are different rules apply, that he was thrown in on this just to be, because he's a member of the Black Panthers. Everything, regardless of who he was as a person, or probably still is, I didn't get that far in my research, was the fact that, they dealt with that issue, that this court said, that
if I may interrupt you for a second,
please.
His compatriot, his friend, who gets assassinated, I believe wasn't even involved in the case, and that's a completely different story that they just brought in. I mean, he was killed. Again, I might be getting my facts correctly, but I was researching a bit beforehand, and it just kind of I don't know, it just something rubbed me. If you're going, it goes back to my original log line. It's to me a liberal look at progressivism, and that's what it felt like. An explanation there. So I might deduct a point off this for these, not just for this story, but for the misgivings of, I don't know. I'm giving it a 2.
All right, fair enough. You know what? I'm actually very quickly, I just want to say I'm going to give it a 2 as well for that reason.
Make that 3 2s.
for the reason that you say, and also the final scene where they're reading the names, where he's reading the names, felt kind of real cheesy to me. Especially when Joseph Gordon-Levitt's like, who's it, like standing for the fallen, like, come on, show some respect. And then the guy walks out. I'm like, Jesus Christ, guys.
That's not what you would have been thinking. No, I agree with you. I'm gonna.
That's not what happened either.
Yeah, it's absolutely not what happened.
Yeah.
They did try to get those names on the record, but they got
the guy who they mistakenly or wrote that he punched the bailiff. It didn't happen either. He actually tried to read out thing. Again, that's not really. Yeah, no, it's not what's important.
I'm not worried about whether or not it happened. I'm worried that it made the end of the movie a little bit
exactly.
And that bugged me. Anyway, that's twos all around for that. We've been on plot for a while now, so let's move on to themes. That's all right. But moving on to themes, Chris, why don't you kick us off?
I don't care if it's Aaron Sorkin. I don't know why I want to call him Alan. Aaron Sorkin or not.
Very Alan.
My main theme is how fucked up our judicial system is. Incredibly fucked up. Everything is a fucking political trial. And I know we get this from the right wing. Oh, there's so much hatred in the world. Oh, I hate identity politics. Fuck you, you play identity politics. Fuck you, you play. Everybody plays identity politics. It's to what measure. All you've got to do at any given point is scream, identity politics, and then somehow it's supposed to put a roadblock in there or somehow validate your point, your position or whatever. But I think the one thing that the film does, intentional or not, because the lib-splaining progressiveness from Aaron Sorkin is such an apt logline. But it really shows you how completely and utterly and totally fucked up our judiciary is. And everything is a political trial. Everything. I served on a grand jury last year. And I had a prosecutor get pissed off at us because we voted not to go forward, and this person asked why, and to which I said, you didn't present your evidence. And she goes, that's not for you to. I said, you gave me reasonable doubt or something. And this person said, you're not allowed to, that's not for this court. I'm like, then what court is it for? And fortunately, the head of the jury room, he goes, yeah, I'm sorry. I should have been the one that said exactly what you said. And then the bailiff said, she's not allowed to ask you those questions. So what you have is in a grand jury, jury decide if something should go to trial, or if you have a crime and there's certain elements to it, how many of these elements can you include in your prosecution? I was then told that sometimes when public prosecutors, if they don't get their whole thing okayed, for lack of a better word, that they get harangued back in the bullpen. My whole point is that fortunately where we live, from firsthand experience, I got to see a lot of our a lot of our law enforcement, and I'm happy to say where Steve-O and Scott and I live, who is not here, we have a very diverse judiciary. But I'm telling you right now, politics is everywhere. Regardless, it's not about Washington. It's not about the Republicans and the Democrats. Politics is everywhere, and this film did a very good job of highlighting the political bullshit that is involved in. He didn't even get far enough in how entrenched it is in our judiciary. And for just the cross section he gave us, I think it's pretty fucking evident that this was, I'm giving this a 1 because as I said, I don't think he went far enough, but that would have detracted from the actual story that was trying to be told. So I'm going to give this a 1.
Okay. Sorry.
Nobody's going to ask me to be in our grand jury again.
Yeah. I mean, sure. That's definitely true. I thought that was there. There's this, theme of kind of the different takes on revolution in this country. What are the different ways that they go about it? I thought it was really interesting to see like everybody's kind of their own ideas of what made them a useful part of fighting back against what they thought was an unjust war, an unjust system, and Nixon specifically. And specifically in terms of the trial, there was definitely like this undercurrent of, if you're viewed as a undesirable under certain regimes, then you will be kind of run down without a real shot at like having a real trial. I thought that apparently like this did a fairly good job of showing who was the judges, Frank Langella, Judge Hoffman, his kind of just meanness, in terms of, or just like intransigence, I guess, if that's the right word, in terms of the way that he viewed the characters. And apparently that was fairly accurate. And apparently it's something that happens a lot, or something that happens more than it should, where judges don't really have to play by the rules that they're supposed to be playing by. And, this movie kind of puts that at the forefront. So I like the themes. I think they're done fairly well. The only thing that I would dock it a little bit for is what Ian mentioned earlier in terms of plot is, I thought that perhaps Bobby Seale got a little bit short shrift in this, and I would have liked to see more of his story, especially because he was the most beset upon of all of them. He was the one that probably deserved to be there the least. He went and gave a speech. He was in Chicago for 4 hours, like he said many times throughout the movie. So yeah, I'm going to give it a pretty strong 1 in terms of that. But I just wanted to mention that as well.
Also, he was being framed for killing someone.
Yes.
So,
but that was in another trial in another state.
Yes.
That's Connecticut. So
how dare a person who is framed for the murder in another state think that they can come up and show and give speeches elsewhere? It's,
right.
Yes. But to use a legal term, cui bono, who benefits? But I mean that not in the sense of how does Sorkin benefit from this, but who's he speaking to here? Now, the thing is, we have dealt with what I call propaganda films. Not that I think this is necessarily the worst type of propaganda film out there. It's well done, but it's definitely a political film trying to put across a point. I'm one of the people it's aimed at. And I saw right through it. In fact, I, against my best interest, was swept up in it for a little bit too. You have our Uncle Sam. What?
No, our parents are the ones it's aimed at.
Now, that's interesting because if it's aimed at my generation, it's a nod to go ahead with what was happening right now. It's saying we fought these battles before, now it's your generation's time to take up that banner. If it's aimed at the baby boomers, then it's a pat on the back, we've done our part. Let us glorify our history. It's Forrest Gump all over again.
Oh, that's funny. It's funny you should say that because I kind of took it as like a go on.
No, and that's who is this for the benefit for? And I think in the past I ruled that effective propaganda as the theme is deserving of a 1 because it gets its intention across. This has gotten 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. So our parents' generation who's reviewing films is eating this up. So that's an effective propaganda tool. But again, there's something about this that like I don't trust. Perhaps that's my paranoia.
Well, as well, you shouldn't. I think.
Well, it's funny because they brought up the whole thing with I can't remember who it was in the meeting, but they said maybe it was Eddie Raymond
Redmayne.
Redmayne, where he said, if we're going to be carrying on progressive politics, to me, the optimistic part of it to me was trying to remind our boomer parents that either A, that we can't stand in the way, Ian, if you're right, maybe it is a multi-tiered message that they cannot stand in the way of people in your generation. And I mean, Chris, I'm between the boomers and you guys. I'm Generation X. I'm gonna fucking tear this bullshit down. So, so it's one of those things where I'm not really sure this is even aimed at me now.
Here's the thing: is this self-congratulatory, or is this actually trying to put forth a? I was actually very offended by that discussion with Tom Hayden attacking Abby Hoffman until Abby Hoffman got his due back at him. But
well, I never thought about it as self-congratulation. I kind of maybe this was the optimist in me, was trying to remind those who were there then who might be what they might have lost, or maybe to kind of remind them why we shouldn't call what's going on now riots. Because that's what I'm going to look at when this thing was shot, because this thing was more topical now in a lot of ways directly. It'd be correlations you could draw right now.
Philadelphia is burning down as we speak.
Yeah, Philadelphia's burning down. You want to talk about the peaceful protests that were addressed with, rubber bullets and tear gas. And that's one of the things that I thought about. We were having this discussion back at the uprising where everybody was like saying, oh, they destroyed the Target, blah, blah, blah. And the president of Target said it's a fucking store. It can be replaced. And you were the one who told me they broke in there to get the milk and so forth to stop the burning from the tear gas. That's what that made me think of, that the fact that tear gas is horrible. It's not like, it's not like, I mean,
actually, they go out of their way in this to point out that tear gas is terrible. You know what? I'm just going to say, as we're running on, that I am going to give this a 1, if anything, just because of Nietzschean eternal recurrence. That we can't actually solve anything, and that the man is going to oppress us, whether it's Nixon or Trump. So,
fair enough. All right, that sounds like ones all around. And let's move on to antagonist. That's going to be me. There's this push for it to be kind of the Judge Hoffman. There's this push for it kind of to be Richard Schultz, the opposite lawyer. And I think that's fair. It's kind of the system in general under Nixon, I guess, is like really their antagonist, because the system in general before that was not interested in, prosecuting these people.
Yeah, LBJ was just looking at prosecuting black people, not the white.
Right, not the white people, right? But see, that's the thing. Well, we'll get into that in a little bit, but in terms of the antagonist, I think that the judge did a good job. The guy who played the judge, Frank Langella, did a good job as the judge. I thought that what's his face, Joseph Gordon-Levitt was fine. I didn't find him really stand out in this movie. I usually like him a lot better than I did in this one. I thought he was just all right.
I actually, if I may, he's the banality of evil.
Yeah, I guess that's what he's. I guess that's what
he's the bureaucratic khaki pants system.
Yeah, or like the thing is, like, he is supposed to be like a good person in this, right? Like, it's just that it's his job to prosecute these guys, and that's what he's going to do. And I think if you're looking for something to not like this about this movie, it's the like continual like draw to the center of both sides. It really feels like Sorkin wants to make both sides seem very reasonable. And maybe that's not for the worst, or maybe it is like just really painting this in a way that's unreasonable and unrealistic. But I don't know. In terms of the antagonist, I think that I'm gonna give him a 1, especially with your argument that JGL is the banality of evil, because he is a very banal character and just kind of like a boring, work a day schlub type guy. Anyway, it's going to be 1 for me unless you guys convince me otherwise.
I just have one quick thing to say. The judge kind of reminded me of the judge from Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's a good thing or not. But it to me, it was almost too much of a caricature. But I think it was handled well enough.
I don't know where to begin with this one. Number one, I was going to say the banality of evil. It was funny because the only part like I liked Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character was when he met Abby Hoffman and his friend in the park with his kids. That humanized him. That actually gave him some dimension as a character objectively. Number two, there's something I meant to point out before I bring it up before I forget about it, was you can tell this was written by a boomer, no offense, Mom, because of the lionizing of Bobby Kennedy. Let us remember that Bobby Kennedy was against Medicare for All solely because Nixon was looking into it. Now, I'm not a fan of Nixon, but I'm also not into this black and white portrayal. And it was like one of the only faults I found in BlacKkKlansman was when they moved it just to, because Nixon sucks, don't get me wrong, but just my little attempt to be objective. But as far as the antagonist goes, I was just going to say the establishment's the antagonist. I mean, because really it is. I mean, the establishment's the antagonist, and maybe that kind of goes into the fact of my taking down Bobby Kennedy a notch or whatever. But when you see Tom Hayden, trying to kind of walk the line between the establishment and the radical, and you realize like his compatriots, oh Christ, what was their judge, their lawyer's name?
William Kunstler.
Kunstler. It was interesting to watch Hoffman, Kunstler, and Hayden talk because they were approaching the establishment from 3 different ways. You've got the radical, the more you had Kunstler being the balance between the two of them. So, which is why I'm calling the establishment the antagonist, because in a lot of ways, everybody was one way or another dealing with how they were going to deal with the political judiciary system as it stood then. And I think that is something that we all deal with on a regular basis. So I was going to give it a 1 by just giving a grandiose the establishment, and that's not a cop-out. That is the one thing I felt every step of this way.
I'm going to take your 2 conversations and give this a 0.
Okay.
Because the prosecutor, if he is representation of the banality of evil, the argument is the system is not wrong. The system works, and the system can be shifted. It's a bunch of racist old people, like the judge, who are bringing our system down. And if we get rid of them, then the Joseph Gordon-Levitts of the world will rise up. But the Joseph Gordon-Levitts of the world are not good people. They're interested in preserving order. And I don't think in the end, it wasn't, would Abby Hoffman have approved of the villains in this? I don't think he would have.
Yeah.
I think he would have said there was, it was too much move to the center. It was too much kumbaya. It was, and not an indictment of the system, but the people within the system. When I think I'm fairly radical, and I think that it was almost a disservice.
Well, I think you figured out why it stuck in your craw, and you couldn't figure it out earlier. Because
that might be it.
I think that's got to be like, and that's kind of similar to how I felt. Though those people certainly did feel antagonistic to me, so I'm going to leave it at a 1. But I get your argument, and that makes a lot of sense as to that's a very good point that you brought up. So let's move on to protagonist though.
Nope, you didn't get my score yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were giving it a 1.
Nope.
Did you say 1?
0. No, and no, and I'm not. No, because the reason I'm giving it a 0 is because.
Oh, all right.
The reason I'm giving it a 0 is if the establishment is a villain, then there was not a case made for that. There was examples of it. I mean, in this film, you were supposed to feel like the judge and Gordon, the judge and everything he stands for was the villain. But the thing is, whether it was intentional or not, Sorkin brought in the establishment, which can be seen when they were discussing, everything that was happening with their group and their little powwows. And I don't mean that to sound derogatory, but when they were in the 7 of them were talking to Kunstler and the second lawyer, I found a lot of their deconstructing much more interesting than a lot of the black and white liberal versus conservative, blah, blah, blah. And this is why I'm giving it a 0, is because there's so much to deal with that they couldn't deal with. But the person they set up as the villain, I felt was, of course I'm going to agree with you. But the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of gray area in between. So that's why I'm giving it a 0, based on the narrative, based on what I saw.
Sounds good. All right. Sounds good. Ian, let's move on to you with protagonist.
A 1 because of what you just said, Chris. Sorkin actually does a fairly good job of being sympathetic to different leftist viewpoints. I think he did a fair job of both critiquing them, and obviously, I'm going to say that there's 3 protagonists here. Abby Hoffman is one of them, representing, in a sense, the formative far left. In a sense, you have Tom Hayden being the more centrist, let's play by the rules. But until you find out, big twist in the narrative, that he let his emotions sweep over him and incited, in a lot of ways, the riot. And then you have William Kunstler, who is almost the generation before, who's sympathetic and is and actually kind of straddles the 2 of them. And I think you mentioned that before, Chris. So I think the 3 of them are the main narrative focus, is an ensemble piece. And again, I think Sorkin actually did a good job of at least being sympathetic to all of those sides.
Yeah.
Give it a 1 for everything you just said, Ian.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that the best part of this movie is the characterization of the protagonists, and not only those 3, but including Rennie Davis and Jerry Rubin are 2 very important parts of Tom and Abby's lives and stories, at least in terms of this. I don't know how close that was to real life, but they were basically like everybody kind of ran in a crew. And that was the other part of their crew, and they kind of balanced them out. They each balanced out the other in interesting ways. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 1, and I'll leave it at that. I think you said everything that I wanted to say there, Ian. Mm-hmm. So Chris, let's talk about supporting characters.
With the cast this big, I was actually really impressed that they gave a lot of people, and Bobby Seale, who was a supporting character who actually should not have been one and should actually have his own Day in the Sun, a biopic about him.
I was going to say Aaron Sorkin should be forced to write Bobby Seale's biopic next.
No, let somebody else do it. But my whole point is
Robert Zemeckis.
Oh, God.
Did you say?
Robert Zemeckis, you can make a white man.
No. Pretty.
The rest of this podcast will be Chris saying
sorry, I'm not going to go there with Zemeckis. How much I can't stand him, but But I'm going to say that for this film, it was I was really impressed. And this is a credit to Sorkin's writing, is that how fleshed out a lot of supporting characters were with very little screen time. I mean, yeah, there were certain caricatures, but overall, a lot of people were given a little more than window dressing despite the amount of screen time. So I'm going to give it a 1 because I felt that it was a well-constructed narrative. And I think that he did treat the supporting characters, gave everybody their moment in the sun, for lack of a better word.
There's a funny thing about that I've noticed watching historic things is that you have the past to talk to. So I often see people include characters that narratively shouldn't be in a film because they're unimportant for the message that they want to say, but they have to include them because they're historical figures. And I feel like that happened a little bit in here. But overall,
I wrote it out. He was like, "Oh, we have no idea why we're here." They just kept saying that. So,
both meta narratively and but nonetheless, Michael Keaton. I am shocked to say that he is a friendly face. I did not know he was in this film. He showed up. I'm like, hey, I'm happy you're here. And I gotta say, like, I don't know why, but all of a sudden, I guess after Birdman or whatever that was,
Spotlight.
Yeah, like he's become one of my favorite actors now. So I'm going to give a 1 just for him, even though I think that overall the portrayals were decent in this.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they were pretty solid for the most part. Standouts were, as you mentioned, was Yahya Abdul Mateen II as Bobby Seale. David Dellinger, or John Carroll Lynch's David Dellinger was good. The two friends that I mentioned, Alex Sharp as Rennie Davis and Jeremy Strong as Jerry Rubin. And yeah, among others, like it was pretty solid. And in terms of the supporting cast, I didn't find myself liking but the cops, like all the other undercover cops that became friends, where he's like, call this part of the trial with friends like these, and then it goes into like all the other undercover cops that were tracking them. I felt like that could have been done a little bit better in terms of those characters, but other than that, I think it did a pretty solid job in terms of the supporting cast, so I'm going to give it a 1 as well. And unless anybody else has anything to say about that, we're going to move on.
I just have one thing to say.
Sure.
Ian, it's really funny you brought up Birdman because I was just thinking about that the other day because I was about to engage in somebody. Never mind. Not important things. Go see Birdman. Good review of it.
Was it called Birdman? It sounds like that was wrong.
Yeah,
no, it was Birdman or the longer title. Please go on, Steve.
Yeah, something of ignorance. The unimportant, whatever. Anyway.
Outstanding movie.
Yes, I liked it quite a bit, but I'm going to talk about dialogue now in this movie. And it's Aaron Sorkin dialogue, it's snappy, it's witty, it's everybody's way more clever than anyone is in real life, and it's fast. It's fine. I mean, it does pretty good, and especially in terms of an Aaron Sorkin joint. I think I enjoyed it pretty much the whole way. It's pretty funny throughout, which, is kind of a forte of his usually in terms of his stuff. He tries to make it serious things funny a little bit and cut the difficulty of topics with humor, and also just making them not as difficult as he does a bit in this. But yeah, in terms of the dialogue, I can't fault it. It's pretty good. So it's going to be a 1, I think, for me.
Is Sorkonian dialogue. You gave me all the pluses and minuses for it. I am sitting right on the fence with this one because it is very sharp, very good dialogue. It's really what you'd expect from a Sorkin thing. I guess I'm gauging the authenticity of it. How do I say this? Is it natural dialogue or is it screen dialogue? So I'm going to hand this over to Ian.
You said you listened to Abby Hoffman quite a bit on Howard Stern back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
It felt natural, partly because of Sacha Baron Cohen doing that, but he felt like a character who gave diatribes like that, who would be doing stand-up comedy. And I actually think one of the smartest things was him giving the speeches and the comedy rallies that I felt that was very natural. And I also, here's the thing is, I've seen a bunch of Sorkin's work, and I also not the biggest fan of Sorkin. He wasn't too much Sorkin in this. He was Sorkin, certainly, but he actually felt more of a restrained Sorkin. Or at least he was at least trying something new with it, with a couple of the ways from what I've seen in the previous one. So I'm going to give it a 1, but I don't know if that pushes you one side or the other on the fence.
The Abby Hoffman argument did persuade me, because like Kunstler, and it was probably one of my favorite characters in this, because he was the emotion plus pragmatism. Not really believing in it, but just knowing how to play the rules of the game, whereas Eddie Raymond, Tom Hayden tried to be a little more. But I agree with you. You convinced me, because to be honest with you, I respect Sorkin in that he writes every fucking word of dialogue. I mean, he writes. I don't think he has a real writing staff. I think he pretty much writes, everything that's been put to page. So I can't not respect that. But I agree with you. I think you're right. I think it was a really smart move to interject a lot of Hoffman's comedy. I did hear him a lot back when I used to listen to Howard Stern in high school. And we were all heartbroken when he killed himself in '89. So you pushed me over the edge. I'm going to give it a 1.
All right. It's 1s all around for that. Ian, let's talk about style.
It was a well done period piece. By that, I'm not saying, I don't think it was the best thing in the world, but we've watched a bunch over the course of doing this podcast. I thought it was handled well, the way they intercut like news footage with scenes, and the period styling was well done. Again, the dialogue might be a transplant from modern Sorkin into that world, but otherwise, it was a good job on these period biopic type stuff. And I'm giving it a flat 1.
Yeah, I think I feel kind of the same way. It's good. I mean, it's good. Good job. Well done. It's not the craziest thing I've ever seen. I thought the editing was fairly good. I thought the cuts were fairly good. And yeah, I mean, it's a biopic. I like the editing in of the earlier, or of the actual footage of things that were going on and things like that. I never felt like it was, contrasting with the type of feel that Sorkin was trying to get. And I thought it was good enough for a 1. So that's what I'm going to give it.
I agree.
I am going to, before the next question, if anybody else has anything else to say about style, go ahead.
I do, because I have to actually give Sorkin credit for this. Sorkin, he avoided using the '60s music as bad as he could have. He avoided all of the real tropes, at least from my memory. I don't know, maybe he did, and I just kind of blanked them out. But it felt like he skirted a lot of the bog standard Vietnam music.
Yeah.
If I hear that one song, that Children, What's That Sound? I'm not going to go there, but the song I'm talking about. I was going to fucking punch the screen. I hate that song.
Fortunate Son with a helicopter flying in the background.
Oh yeah, and Fortunate Son, that was another one. Mm-hmm. I agree with you, Ian. That's definitely a plus for style.
Yeah. Now, all this being said, I had an argument that I didn't make anywhere, and I think I have to take a point off somewhere for it, and I'm trying to figure out where.
Okay.
Well, not necessarily that I didn't make it, but I didn't bring it up on any question that it really pertained to, which is the, um, radical progressives are made to feel more centrist in this movie, and the unreasonable, uh, you know, uh, like Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character in real life was not anything like, but he's made to feel more like it feels like a real pull to the center. Uh, this movie in a lot of ways, and it that was kind of what bugged me about it, in the way that you said, like something was sticking in your craw, and it feels like they're trying to convince everybody that we're all the same, when in a moment when people are having real problems with like people wanting them dead, and like maybe that's something that um needs to I don't know, maybe that's something that Sorkin feels needs to happen in some way, is that everybody kind of just needs to understand each other, and then we'll all be fine. But like,
Who benefits, or who's this for?
right,
And that goes back to my argument for that.
exactly. So I don't know, I'm either going to take a point off of themes or antagonist, I think, for this.
Either one would work.
And maybe themes, because while there are some themes that I liked about this, that was like you said, there was something like sticking in your head about it, and that was what was sticking in my head about this movie. So
I agree completely with that point.
I think I'm going to take a point off of themes, and unless anyone else has anything else to say about that, we're going to move on. Good. All right. Let's move on to recommendation, Chris.
My answer was in the plot and maybe the themes, in that I recommend this with one caveat. This film made me want to do more research. This film made me want to look more at myself. But this film made me want to research these people who have, in a lot of ways, inspired a lot of the things that I can pretty much say four of us in the Lost Signals to agree on, and that I'm a big one for saying what's going on now. Do not call them riots. Do not call them riots. Do not call them riots. If there's any good to come out of this, it's a think piece. Do your research. Watch this film. Don't get caught up in the adrenaline rush, because there is, because not everything has a Hollywood ending. That was a song for something. I can't remember what it was. Oh, it's Anna and the Apocalypse. Anyway, not important. Important thing is that, sorry, there is a song. We just saw this movie, and like one of the songs was "Not Everything Has a Hollywood Ending" or something like that. But yeah, the caveat is, do not let that stop at this film. Let this film question this as you should question everything, even people you agree with. Question everything. So I recommend it, with the caveat that I'm going to do my research more. Please do your research more. It is, as a film, a worthwhile film. It's a really nice narrative, blah, 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 a lot of good stuff, but thematically, to everything else, do, as topical as it is, do look into who these people were. I'm going to, and please do. So I'm going to give it a 1.
Before watching this movie, I had conflated the Central Park 5 with the Chicago 7. And I'm sorry to say, I didn't know a lot of this information. It is, I knew Abby Hoffman but not, I actually thought it was a woman, to be perfectly honest. This was a blind spot for me in history, and Aaron Sorkin taught me something. Whether it was an elementary school reading or of a historical event, it did make me do research, and I found some people I'm going to do more research on. I'm actually looking forward to listening to more of Abby Hoffman. I'm hoping to find some stuff on YouTube. So yeah, I actually already recommended it to people. Just take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Especially what you said, Chris. in terms of like, yeah, go watch it, enjoy the movie, but do your research. And you'll all notice, like when we do movies like this, or almost any movie, a lot of times one of us, or usually Ian, will be like, so I was doing research about this. And, you know, and we all do to an extent, especially when we watch something like this that has to do with history. We kind of look into it, see what's true, what's not, and where it jives with history and where it doesn't. And yeah, this is a good movie. It's a good watch. It's engaging. It's fun. Don't let it be the only thing that you know about this, especially if you find it interesting. Look more into it and see what else you can dig up and find out about it. That should go for pretty much anything you find interesting, but especially for biopics like this, and especially for moments in history biopics like this. So,
and especially ensemble biopics, because they don't have enough time to really do deep dives on any one individual.
Absolutely.
It'd be weary about who the top names are and who they play.
Yeah. But I think that's going to do it for us, unless anybody else has anything else. So I think we all gave it the same score. We all gave it 2s for plot. I gave a 0 for theme eventually. We all initially had a 1 for theme, but I gave a 0 for theme eventually. And both of you gave 0s for antagonists in terms of the system wasn't a strong enough antagonist, I guess, in this as it could have been. So
it was too one-dimensional.
Yeah, that's right. It's going to be 8s all around, an aggregate score of an 8. Pretty good score for this movie. I think that if I was going to just randomly give it a score, I'd probably give it somewhere around a 7. So 8's fairly close, maybe a little bit higher than I expected, but not too bad. And it's a good movie. Go check it out. So we have been the Lost Signals talking about film and television. I have been your host, Steve Ramosi, joined today by Jonathan Ian Medzer.
I ain't no fortunate son, just to be cliche at the end.
And Christopher Morgan.
Power to the people, and do not call them riots, because no matter who wins this election, there's going to be peaceful protests. There's going to be peaceful demonstrations. If those protests and demonstrations are met with derision and deflection from the right, if they're met with indifference and patronizing from the left, there's going to be an uprising. Do not call it riots.
And after we all make money and become our parents, the next generation, there'll be videos on it because this is going to happen forever.
It's true.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry for the political thing, but I mean, this film has me worked up. And the thing is, it
was not a political movie.
That's right. I'm sorry.
Guys of movies.
Here's a piece. I'm going to go watch The West Wing now.
All right. Have a good one, guys. Good night.
Editing and engineering by Jonathan Ian Manser. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or Mott's?